Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's segment. My name is Kenji Taguma. I am the editor in chief of the Nichi Bei Weekly, and prior to that, the English section editor of the Nichi Bei Times. I'm proud to be here today with two of our wonderful longtime contributors, Martha Nakagawa in Gardena and Takeshi Nakayama in Walnut, California, both in Southern California. Uh, just like to give a little bit of introduction. Takeshi Nakayama worked for 36 years at the Rafu Shimpo from 1965 until 2001, elevating from the print room to becoming the English section editor. He's also written for the Hokubei Mainichi, Cultural News, Nichi Bei Times, and for the last 12 years, the Nichi Bei Weekly. He's certainly one of our community treasures. Martha Nakagawa has been writing in the community ethnic press since 1991, first at AsianWeek, for a long time at the Rafu Shimpo. As assistant editor at the Pacific Citizen, she's written for Hawaii Herald, the Nichi Bei Times, and again for the last 12 years, the Nichi Bei Weekly. Please help me welcome them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today we want to talk about your involvement in the community ethnic press and why you think it's important. So the first question I have for you is, what drives you to be involved in the community press? And Takeshi, if you could answer first.
I like the community. I like what's going on. I like to know what's going on in the community. That's all. So I'm a nosy guy.
Okay. And Martha, what about you?
I think that journalism is history in a hurry. So if we don't write our history gets lost. And I mean, a good example is Bronzeville, when African Americans were in the Little Tokyo area during World War II. There weren't a lot of African American writers, so a lot of that history was lost. Most of the writers were on the East Coast in New York, so very little was documented. So if we don't document our own history, it gets lost, and that's why I stay in our community presses and had not gone over to the mainstream media.
Okay, great. Takeshi, you covered a lot of story on Japanese American redress. How did the collective Nikkei Press contribute to the overall success of the Japanese American Redress Movement?
A lot, I think, because we let the people know what people like NCRR and JCL and all them were doing for redress and what kind of meetings they were having, what kind of actions they were taking. We let the people know so that they could get involved. I think we helped galvanize the community to get behind the redress movement. But of course, the main attention should go to the activists who actually fought for redress, which would be like NCRR, NCJAR, JACL, and whoever else.
Great. Martha, you worked at the Pacific Citizen, the newspaper of the Japanese American Citizens League, at a time, at the height of what was being discussed of a controversial issue of recognizing the Nisei draft resistors who were ostracized by JCO leaders during World War II. What surprised you when reporting about that issue, and can you tell us about the impact of your reporting?
So when I started writing about the draft resistors at the Pacific Citizen, I started getting phone calls and office visits from JCL members who were staunchly against apologizing to the draft resistors. But I didn't stop writing about them, and because of that, I was called anti-JCL, anti-veteran. People were calling for my firing. We had to have a meeting over a decision I made to put a particular story on the front page of the Pacific Citizen. And so it definitely hit a nerve, and the passion and the anger that the JCLers were projecting at me were very deep-seated. I can even say I was kind of irrational, but I did keep writing about them because I felt like this topic had to be documented, and I wanted to contribute in my own small way to the debate over whether the JCL should apologize to the draft resistors. And on a bigger level, this issue is really important because it deals with the constitutionality of drafting men out of the US concentration camps, which were basically prisons. And it's also, what are the war powers of the president and Congress? And what is the meaning of US citizenship if you are a person of color in comparison to if you're an American citizen, if you are white? But not only that, I think the biggest thing that motivated me is if we don't write about this history gets lost. And I was hoping in the future generations, these people could be role models. And so that kept me going.
Mm-hmm. Right. You have both seen the Nikkei Press evolve over the years. How important is it to maintain Japanese American community newspapers? Takeshi?
It's very important. It keeps the community together.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they'll just become holified,
Mm-hmm.
white,
Mm-hmm.
Caucasianized.
Okay.
As long as you get to know about their culture, about their people, and what's going on. And the obituary is very important too. It lets people know who died, whether it's a member of the family or friends of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps them closer.
Yeah.
Whatever comes out in the paper,
Mm-hmm.
that strikes close to home for the readers,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's about issues like redress or whatever else, or whether it's about anti-Asian hate crimes. It's good that they know about it and they know more about the inner workings of the people involved, meaning the victims, and what the community can do to fight all this anti-Asian stuff.
Okay. Martha, your thoughts on how important it is to maintain a Japanese American community newspaper?
I think it's really important. Like as Tak said, I agree with what he had said. And again, I want to emphasize how important that the younger generation could read about our history in our paper. And even a lot of the current events that are going on. I mean, even in Southern California, we have the controversy with Cato, and that's been covered in our paper, and also HR 40, the reparations to African Americans. There's a lot of Japanese Americans involved in that. So I think that information gets out to the older generation through the Nikkei Press, and of course through social media. The younger generation is reached through that, but that's also publicized in the Nikkei Press. So I think it really is the glue that keeps us together.
Great. Where do you see the community press in 10 years? Tak?
And that's hard to say. I hope it's still going strong, but you never know, because I heard that the Rafu is down to 3 days a week right now.
Mm.
So who knows? It depends on the ownership too, and how the community talks to the ownership or even pressures them to keep going instead of taking all the money for themselves.
Mm. Okay. Martha, you have any thoughts on where the Nikkei Press would be in 10 years?
I'm more optimistic. I think it will be here, not in the same form. I think that it will have a larger digital presence, just like all the mainstream media is right now. So I think it'll still be around.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And lastly, for both of you, over your long careers, what stands out in terms of stories that you covered and things that were especially meaningful to you? Tak?
I liked covering the redress movement. In fact, I went to Washington, D.C. to the Justice Department with 3 of the NCRR members back in 1990, October, and got to witness the presentation of the first redress check to the oldest surviving incarcerees. And the Attorney General got up to hand them the checks, and he was on his knees apologizing to them because they're so little. But it looked like he was on his knees, bowing and apologizing. That was very meaningful. Also, I like writing about Frank Emmy, the draft resistors, Art Mountain draft resistor, because he came up with a lot of good, colorful language in describing JACL's opposition to the resistors. Stuff that stays with me.
Okay. Martha, for you?
Mine's a little more personal. When I was at the Rafu, I used to cover crime, and there was an elderly man that I covered. I think he was a Nisei, and he didn't speak English very well. And his truck had been stolen, and that stolen truck had been in a car accident, and the deputy district attorney was going to file charges against this elderly man. So I wrote a story about this issue, and I actually went to the house of the person whose car had been struck by the stolen vehicle, and took pictures, and I wrote a story, and I appeared in court with this elderly man who was what I remember is that day he was very nervous. He brought a Bible with him, and there was no family member with him, so I'm thinking he was probably a bachelor. And the insurance agent was there, and she was also Japanese American, and she had a meeting with the deputy district attorney, and they came out and they said all the charges were being dropped. And she later told me she thought the Rafu article had a big impact on the decision because of the negative publicity it would generate. So in a very small way, that was very rewarding to me.
Great. So I thank you, both Takeshi and Martha, for joining us today and sharing some of your insights into the importance of the Nikkei Press and the legacy of the Nikkei Press. It was very insightful. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, like to thank you both for not only, your contributions over the years, but your friendship. I think you both handling a lot of the hardcore community issues have shed light on so much for the entire Japanese American community, and this is the only chance I'm gonna get to thank you publicly, but really appreciate it, and we appreciate it having you within the Nichi Bei family. So thank you for all your contributions, and we hope that you will continue to contribute and help to enlighten us on issues impacting our community and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've done a lot for the community also.
Yeah.